Bom dia, good morning, good dag. I'm Jorge Camargo. I'm the vice chair of the CEBRI, the Centro Brasileiro de Relações Internacionais Board of Directors. And it is my privilege to welcome you to this joint CEBRI and General Norwegian Consulate event on maritime challenges, decarbonization, and geopolitical tensions. This is the second CEBRI event in partnership with the Norwegian Consulate. The first one was held in 2019 and focused on the impacts of the current energy transition on the maritime sector. It generates a very lively debate at the time and also resulted in a white paper that is available at CEBRI's website. So I'd like to take this opportunity and also the presence of General Consul Marianne Fosland to express how much CEBRI appreciates and value this partnership with the Norwegian Consulate and with Norway in general. So, tusen takk, Marianne. Today, we will discuss the current geopolitical shifts and the path to decarbonization as potential challenges to the maritime sector and how these topics can impact or interact with each other. To address these issues, it is our privilege and our honor to have Deputy Minister Lars Andreas Lunde and Admiral Eduardo Leal Ferreira. Mr. Lunde he took over this position as Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry of Norway in October 2020. So I believe it's not too late, Minister, to congratulate you on this position. But before that, he was a Deputy Director in the Norwegian Agency for Development and Cooperation from 2018 to 2020, State Secretary in the Ministry of Climate and Environment from 2013 to 2018, and political advisor to the Conservative Party in the Parliament from 2001 to 2017. Mr. Lunde holds a Master in Maritime Technique from the National Institute of Technology and Science and a degree in economy. Admiral Eduardo Ferreira Leal is the chairman of the board of directors of Petrobras, and before retiring, he was the commander of the Brazilian Navy. I think it's also fair to say that Eduardo is one of the most admired admirals in Brazil. So thank you, Eduardo, also to join us today. This debate will be moderated by my dear friend, Clarissa Lins. Clarissa is the founder partner of Catavento. She's also CEBRI's senior fellow and president of IBP, the Brazilian Institute for Petroleum and Gas. So thank you very much, Clarissa, and all involved in structuring, in organizing this event for us. With that, I'd like to pass the floor to our General Consul, Marianne Fosland, for her initial considerations. And thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a very pleasant, productive, and instructive event. Thank you. Marianne.
Thank you. Good morning, bon dia, good afternoon, god ettermiddag. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Ferreira, Deputy Minister Lunde, Clarissa Lins, Jorge Camargo, dear friends. I really wish to start by thanking CEBRI for organizing this event. And as you said, this is the second year that we are collaborating to discuss issues related to the maritime sector. And as you also pointed out, Jorge, last year we had a fruitful discussion about the new green technologies available in the maritime sector, with a stellar team of speakers, I must say. And I'm sure this year will be no different. And I really wish to thank CEBRI and Catavento for conceiving this program. And I'm glad to see that we are so many friends gathered here, although virtually, to talk about a topic where Norway and Brazil share so much synergy and history. Many of you here today have a shared history with Norway, so this discussion feels at home. As you all know, our two countries are, with our long coastlines, naturally connected to the sea, and it is a basis for many of our economic activities. Collaboration between Norway and Brazil in the maritime sector is solid and long established. We even have a memorandum of understanding from 2015 on maritime transport, desiring to establish an adequate framework toward the development of an efficient, safe, and sustainable maritime transport sector. You know, 45% of Norwegian investments in Brazil are in the maritime, offshore, and oil and gas sectors. And the last 5-year period from 2013 to 2018 was historically strong for Norwegian investments in Brazil. The total investment exceeded $10.1 billion, with 4.2 billion added in the time between 2017 and 18. That's quite remarkable. Norwegian companies are present in all segments of the exploration and production chain of the Brazilian oil and gas sector, from seismic to production units and transport. They represent 15% of the offshore support vessel fleet and 33% of more advanced segments. It is also relevant, the presence in shuttle tanker segment and in production units with Altera, BW, and Jensen. And Brazil is actually the only country where the Norwegian Ship Owner Association has a representation outside of Norway, here well represented by Abran. Norwegian offshore service providers have been collaborating in the development of the Brazilian industry for many years, collaborating with Brazilian companies to develop innovative technology for the sector. This is why I'm confident that the Norwegian and Brazilian collaboration has the potential to succeed in finding innovative solutions to decarbonize the sector, implementing green and sustainable technologies for vessels operating in the Brazilian coast. And as government representatives here in Brazil, we are proud to see that many Norwegian companies established in the country are investing in sustainability as a part of their local portfolios, either by implementing new green technologies or by compensating emissions by committing funds to R&D or investing in more renewable energy. We expect this to continue to be a trend moving forward. The times are challenging, we know that. The COVID-19 pandemic were disruptive to global markets and added another layer of complexity to the already challenging efforts needed to decarbonize and to meeting the climate agenda. But as I said, I am confident that cooperation is the key word to overcome such a challenge. Both oceans and climate are transnational issues. They require global and multilateral solutions. And that is why I am excited that we are coming together here today to share information, debating, and collaborate. I really wish us all a good program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marianne and Camargo, for opening this very special session. And it's my true pleasure to be the host for the debate and to again welcome our distinguished panelists, Deputy Minister Lars Lunde and my dear friend Almirante Eduardo Leal Ferreira. As mentioned by Camargo and Marianne, today's event has to do about challenges around maritime industry, both related to decarbonization, but also to geopolitical tension. And this event was based on a very interesting report issued by the Global Maritime Forum, which is a nonprofit organization supported by different companies and organizations throughout the world. As a matter of fact, this report has mapped top maritime global challenges in terms both of impact and likelihood, probability. And both decarbonization and geopolitical tensions were pointed out as leading challenges to be faced by this industry. As we know, in order to meet the global climate Paris Agreement goals, the global maritime sector needs to undergo structural changes to reduce its emissions, which currently represent 2% of total global emissions. Different countries and companies are mapping different pathways to decarbonize and pursuing different strategies in order to achieve these goals. At the same time, we've been experiencing a period of unprecedented geopolitical change, marked by the erosion of global institutions and international norms. In addition to that, the outbreak of COVID-19 has also questioned the way in which global trade and supply chains are currently structured. We've been seeing national tendencies intensifying, potentially restricting cooperation and economic flows. And as a consequence, global trade is expected to decrease by around 30 to 40% this year. So in order to explore these issues, our special guests will address their considerations, having initially a slot of 10 to 15 minutes time for each one of them. And after that, I'll be happy to moderate the Q&A session with the audience. So please, Deputy Minister, I'd like to start by you, and you have the floor. Thank you very much for your presence today.
Thank you very much, Clarissa. Admiral Ferreira, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of your friends in Brazil. And thank you so much for inviting me to this important webinar. And I would like to offer my gratitude to CEBRI and to the Norwegian Consulate General in Rio de Janeiro for putting this online event together. And even though we have to keep a distance right now, it is more important than ever to join forces as we are sailing through turbulent waters. Because as we all know, we are in the middle of a corona crisis. Just before coming here, I was just briefly watching CNN, seeing some terrible pictures from hospitals all over the world, really reminding us of the seriousness of this pandemic in many countries, including Norway and Brazil. And as the health and human toll grows, the economic damage is evident, and it represents possibly the largest economic shock the world has experienced in decades, larger than the financial crisis in 2008. But we are also facing a climate crisis with huge economic implications. And on top of that, the oil price drop has already made the situation difficult during the last few years, especially in the offshore and maritime sector. And this affects all of us. Brazil and Norway are both ocean-oriented nations. The ocean provides food, it provides jobs, and it provides economic growth. And it connects us to the rest of the world. We still do not know how COVID-19 will affect world trade and the ocean-based industries in the long run, or what effects it could have on the entire supply chain. But we do know that the pandemic has affected the livelihoods and food security of millions of people all over the world, and especially in developing countries. And we also do know that global trade has been badly hit. Exports of goods and services are facing barriers, and crew changes have been difficult due to corona restrictions. And as we are facing these challenges, international cooperation is more important than ever. And especially for Norway, Norway is a small country with an open economy. It is therefore important for us to do what we can to defend and to promote the rules-based multilateral system. By working together, both Norway and Brazil can strengthen our position as ocean nations, especially in the maritime and offshore sector. A continued close cooperation is the recipe for success in the years to come. The corona crisis, no matter how severe it is, it will hopefully pass during the next months or maybe then during the next year. But the climate change will unfortunately be with us still for decades to come. Climate change and our commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is therefore critically important for all of us. The present ocean-based economy is a large and diverse mix of industries that includes offshore oil and gas, shipping, tourism, wind power, seabed mining, fishing, and marine aquaculture. These industries also serve a thriving processing and supply industry onshore. To make progress towards a greener industry and lower greenhouse gas emissions, it is essential that both the private and the public sector work together. And the experience and expertise that Brazilian and Norwegian businesses already possess will be important in that regard. And at the same time, we need new ideas and businesses to be able to expand the range of ocean-based industries. In the case of Norway, the Norwegian maritime industry is already at the forefront of developing new technology and adapting new environmentally friendly solutions. The Norwegian government's ocean strategy, called Blue Opportunities, pinpoints 3 strategic focus areas. 1, competence and digitalization. 2, regional and local value creation. And 3, climate and green shipping. By focusing on these 3 areas, the Norwegian government aims to reach its clear goal, which is for Norway to be a leading ocean nation. And we believe that spearheading the development of green shipping is key to this endeavor. Green shipping is a central part of the government's maritime policy. And the reason for that is elegant and simple. By taking a lead, Norway will secure the competitiveness of its maritime industry. The 2018 IMO strategy on greenhouse gas emissions is not just an important milestone in combating global warming. It also represents a fundamental shift for global shipping, as it aims to reduce total emissions from shipping by 50% by 2050. It sends an important signal to ship owners, shipbuilders, and suppliers that a new market for low and zero emission maritime solutions is emerging. This does not just mean that emissions will be reduced, but it also means new and green jobs. This is a double win. Last year, the Norwegian government's action plan for green shipping was published. It states that the ambition is to reduce emissions from domestic shipping and fisheries by 50% by 2030. And by taking a lead in green shipping, we are better equipped to reach that goal and to secure our maritime industry stays competitive. Norway has taken many measures to develop green shipping: tax incentives, research and development, funding and support schemes, as well as developing regulations. Green requirements in public tenders for ferries have been especially effective. Norway introduced the world's first LNG ferry in the year 2000. The first fully electric ferry was introduced in 2015. And by 2022, we will have 17 battery ferries in operation. This represents 1/3 of all Norwegian ferries. New zero-emission solutions are also being developed. Next year, our first hydrogen electric propulsion ferry will begin its operations. And in 2023, the first offshore vessel, fueled by ammonia, will follow. And to summarize, the Norwegian perspective is that continued development and implementation of low and zero emission solutions in shipping will be important in both reducing greenhouse gas emissions and creating new jobs through exports to an emerging market for green shipping. Achieving this scenario can only be done through close cooperation with the industry itself. And the Norwegian maritime sector shares our ambition for a cleaner, greener future. Shipping accounts for 2.2% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. In May this year, the Norwegian Shipowners Association published an ambitious strategy aiming to become completely climate neutral by 2050. This shows that the Norwegian shipping industry is taking a forward-leaning approach to meet the climate challenges. In the next few weeks, the Norwegian government will prepare a white paper on maritime policy to the Parliament. This white paper will focus on digitalization and competences and, naturally, green shipping. The need for action when it comes to climate change and ocean pollution is just as urgent now as it was before COVID-19. The Paris Agreement aims to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change, and Norway is fully committed to follow up. The maritime and offshore sector is facing huge challenges, but the green shift also offers great opportunities. And by working together, we can take advantage of these opportunities. Therefore, I believe conversations like this one we are having just now today is more important than ever. And with these words, I will say thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the panel debate afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for making the case of the Norwegian maritime path to a green one so clear. And I'll be sure that there are plenty of questions really on what are the main lessons that the Brazilian industry can learn from, but also, you know, the challenges that you're facing and how are you addressing those challenges as well. But I'll keep these for the Q&A sessions. Thank you very much. Admiral Eduardo, now it's the floor is yours, and please share with us your thoughts on these interesting issues that we are debating this morning. Welcome. And no, you need to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. First, I want to thank CEBRI, particularly you, Clarissa, the Energy Group Senior Fellow, for the honor of this invitation. I also want to greet Mr. Lars Andreas Lunde, Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, Marianne Fosland, Norway's Consul General in Rio, and our Group Coordinator and Vice Chair, Jorge Camargo. I will address some considerations on the guidelines that were proposed by CEBRI. And the first of it is on the impact of COVID on current degree of globalization, how it affected the maritime sector, and which geopolitical issues it may arise. Most of all international trade is made by sea. The maritime system tends to react very fast to any shift in the economy or any disturbance that interferes with the normal course of life in this highly globalized world. COVID was a major disturbance, and I will focus on three of its effects on the maritime sector. The first effect was the difficulties to rotate the crews of the merchant ships all over the world. Little has been said about this problem in Brazil, but it's extremely relevant. Hundreds of thousands of seamen have not been relieved in due time or on a regular basis since the beginning of the pandemics. Many of them have been working on board ships relentlessly for a very long time now. Their replacements cannot travel to meet the ships due to borders closed, lack of air travel, or for quarantine requirements. The second effect was the instability in all forms of sea trade due to the shrinkage of the economy. As the economy begins to recover, we may expect that sea trade will naturally return to normal. There may be some change in routes and major ports of call, since the logistic chain of some products considered to be strategic may be shifted from a country to others. But there is no reason to believe that there will be a new deglobalization. The third effect was the cruise sector. No other economic activity, not even the airlines, suffered so much with COVID as the cruise industry. Many cruise ships are being scrapped, and until the end of September, it's estimated that the sector lost more than $50 billion and 350,000 jobs. Regarding geopolitical tensions, the three hotspots of the oceans considered to be a potential of a local crisis evolving into a major conflict are the South China Sea, the Persian Gulf, and East Mediterranean. Of these hotspots, South China Sea is especially worrisome. Recently, for many reasons, and I would include the outburst of COVID as one of them, but definitely not the most important, tensions have escalated to a new level, and especially between the two biggest stakeholders, China and the United States. By the way, it seems that both countries understand quite clearly the truth of the saying, the crown of the world belongs to the one who carries the trident of Neptune. The United States is one of the most important players regarding maritime and sea power, if not the most important. Militarily, the US has been very active in South China Sea on a strategy of containment and deterrence of China. Despite its huge economic and military growth, China has a strategic vulnerability represented by its restricted accesses to open waters of the Pacific or the Indian Oceans. On normal times, this is not a big issue, but in case of a conflict or a major international crisis, it becomes very relevant. For instance, tankers with oil imports from the Persian Gulf must sail through narrow and easily blocked straits, such as the Straits of Hormuz and Malacca, or as an alternative, Strait of Sonde. That explains why China has been so assertive in its sovereignty claims in the South China Sea, and also its decision to develop the Belt and Road Initiative, the so-called Silk Road, as a bypass to its limited geography. The second proposed guideline is about the role of international institutions in maintaining order and safety at sea. The sea is probably the realm where mankind has achieved greatest progress in developing an orderly international system where international law prevails. The concept of freedom of navigation is essential to its good and smooth functioning. The law of the Sea Convention is accepted by most countries, sometimes fully accepted, sometimes partially, but overall, it is working very well. There are several international organizations that guarantee the proper functioning of the systems. Among these, we have the International Court of Justice, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, the Seabed Authority, and the International Maritime Organization. There are also dozens of regional or specialized organizations that regulate, manage, advise, or control human activities at sea, such as fishing. Of these international organizations, IMO is probably the most conspicuous of all. It covers all parts of maritime transportation and the shipping industry, including maritime pollution. As the minister said, IMO goal is to reduce carbon emissions by 50% before 2050. Nevertheless, despite what has been achieved by treaties, conventions, agreements, and their controlling organizations, there are lots of wrongdoings at sea. Admiral Stavridis says that the sea is the biggest crime scene of the world. Environmental crimes, drug trafficking, piracy, human trafficking, and illegal, unreported, or unregulated fishing are a major concern to most countries. It is said that international drug trafficking, for instance, is a business bigger than international trade of cars plus agriculture. Combating piracy is in some areas, such as the waters near Somalia, has required the use of combined multinational naval forces. Nowadays, piracy is especially active in the Gulf of Guinea. And on environmental crimes, a good example happened right here in our coast last year, when a spill of hundreds of tons of crude oil from a ship outside our exclusive economic zone ended up polluting more than 1,000 kilometers of northeast beaches. Regarding fisheries and aquaculture, sustainability is a major issue. Global fish production represents threefold that of cattle meat. The problem is that about a third of all commercial species are overcaptured beyond their biological sustainability level. and it is also estimated that a large amount of catch is performed by IUU fishing. In addition to sustainability, fishing has been the cause of many disputes and crises between countries. The third guideline for this meeting is about the Brazilian potential in face of the sea as a source of energy and food, and as means of transportation, and how this can contribute to a more prominent international insertion of the country. Well, beginning from the last part of the question, we can say that Brazil has plenty of water, energy, and food, three commodities the world is always in need. The country will naturally tend to have a prominent role in any decision-making process or any international forum that is established to discuss energy, food, and water. We are not good in fishing. Less than 2% of the world production comes from Brazil. But agribusiness makes the country the second largest world's exporter of food, racing to become the first. A recent report published in Jornal do Comércio said that the country produces enough food to feed 1.6 billion people all over the world, and that the next 30 years, almost 40% of all new demands for food worldwide will be provided by Brazilian farmers. All these products reach international markets by sea. Brazil is responsible for approximately 8% of all international cargo transported by sea, volume-wise. Cheap cargo, but a lot of it. As we must always remember, Brazil is far away from most markets, and if we want to be competitive, we must be logistically efficient, and this includes the maritime side of the logistic chain. Regarding energy, again, Brazil is in a very comfortable position. Our electricity comes from a very clean matrix with little greenhouse gas emissions. Just 15% of our electricity is obtained by fossil fuel power plants versus more than 50% on other countries like OECD countries. We have oil to supply our own needs with a surplus of approximately 1,800,000 to 1 million barrels a day that are exported. Most of it comes from the continental shelf offshore. And our biggest challenge is to reduce carbon emissions during the production process. And I think that Petrobras, as well as Equinor, is way ahead of most other oil companies in this field. We produce approximately 17 kilos of carbon per barrel, and the average is higher than that, much higher, offshore. We must always keep in mind that the oil is not just a commodity. It still is an asset of deep strategic influence. The recent crisis between Greece and Turkey over rights of exploration of oil near Aegean island of Castellorizo is a clear example of its strategic importance. Geopolitical, out of the 5 biggest offshore production areas in the world, West Africa, Gulf of Mexico, North Sea, Brazil, and Persian Gulf, 2 are in very troubled waters, Persian Gulf and West Africa, with potential to disrupt the oil market in case of a crisis. The new prospective areas for offshore exploration, the Arctic, South China, and Guyana present problems too. In Guyana, the waters where oil was found are a projection of Essequibo, an area inland claimed by Venezuela. In South China Seas, there are big tensions between adjacent countries over disputed areas and involving the US too. And the Arctic, and our Norwegian friends here can better explain, is a very sensitive area environmentally and faces disputes on overlapping exclusive economic zones and continental shelves. There are a lot of discussions going on in the exploration of oil in the Arctic. Well, besides oil, the Blue Amazon potentially can provide other forms of energy, such as wind and bioenergy, CWEs. Referring to wind, a lot of new technologies are coming to reality, and the cost of producing electricity from wind energy arrays is getting cheaper by the day. The oceans are very good to receive those structures because the winds tend to be more regular and stronger, thus compensating the higher costs of construction and maintenance. Besides, wind energy produced onshore or offshore near the coast faces increasing opposition from conservation groups and fishing interests for reasons such as interference with other human activities and with nature itself, as the killing of birds. At sea, floating structures can be installed further away from the coast, preventing most of the problems that I have just cited. Well, that's what I had to say. I think during my 15 minutes of Andy Carroll and Warrell fame, thank you very much. I return the floor to you, Clarissa.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. It was absolutely on time. And thank you very much for sharing your deep understanding of the sea, but also on the Brazilian potential to be really a very relevant player when it comes to food, energy, and sea issues. So I appreciate very much. I'll come back to you on the Q&A session with regard to the South China Sea disputes, because I know that it is an issue that you're very interested in, and of course it has a huge impact also on the topics that we are discussing, namely globalization. But I'll start the Q&A session then by Minister Lunde, maybe coming back to one of the aspects that you've mentioned, the instruments that you have. We lost you. Did we lose him?
Oh, sorry.
Your camera was turned off.
Sorry, I was unmuting and somehow I also turned off the video.
No, thank you. So I have two questions, but I'll start the first one by coming back to the instruments that you mentioned that the Norwegian government has in place, really to drive the decarbonization of your maritime industry. So if I'm correct, you mentioned tax incentives, R&D, but also, of course, new regulation to be put in place. So I'd like, if you might, explore a little bit more. So to what extent do you really have, fiscal funds to sponsor the transition? Or to what extent do you rely on the private sector to invest in research and development, really to make new technologies affordable and viable? This is really something that I have in mind, because I'm not sure that the Norwegian example could be, applied here, for instance, which is a country with very low fiscal revenues availability.
Yeah, actually, we have several. Thank you very much for a very good and very interesting questions, which I will try to elaborate more on. And we have several instruments that we are using. First, we're having several funds from all the way in the value chain, from funds for research until to funds for market introduction, where ship owners and shipyards and the maritime industry can apply for, and where the state supports, especially from risk sharing a risk, because I think the market in the future will be very profitable for low emission and zero emission ships. I think that is where the market is coming with all the, of course, as the world gets more and more into climate and see the Paris Agreement being implemented. But of course, in the short run, many of these companies are facing large risks. It's risky to be in front of all to be in the forefront. So we have this fund so that to reduce the risk, so that we encourage the maritime industry to make these investments by maybe having the state take some of the risks with these investments with such as guarantees, loans, or other ways to provide risk capital to the maritime industry. So that is one thing to help them. Also, another important factor we are using is public tender. As much of our domestic fleet, our coast fleet, especially the ferries, their services they do for public, for the counties or for the state, like the ferries we have. And as you know, Norway is a country with many fjords, a very long coastline and many fjords. So we have several ferry distances. Ferries are a part of our road system. So that public tender is also a very efficient tool, and this is how we managed to have the first electric ferry and this hydrogen combustion engine and so on, also to make very strong demands in our public tender to promote new technologies, because we want to use this public tender to introduce to make the companies and the industry develop new technologies. So I think these are two of our main tools when it comes to the shipping. Of course, we also have taxes, which we can use, but that is mainly for domestic shipping, because international shipping, you can buy the fuel everywhere. So as long as you don't have an international tax or an international quota system, that is sometimes more difficult to use. But especially for domestic shipping, we can use that. But I think public tender and funds for research, development, and market introduction are our most important tools.
Yeah, very interesting. And if you would kind of signal a time frame or a time horizon for the transition to be completed, would it be more 2030, 2050?
We have different targets. We have 2030 targets and we have 2050 targets. Of course, the 2030 targets, we also, we are a part of, together with EU, we made a joint commitment with the EU for our Paris targets for 2030, which means we have to reduce our emissions according to the agreement we have with the EU, and we have to deliver a budget, an emission budget up to 2030 with the EU with very clear emission targets. Right now, we have an overall target for Norway to reduce our emissions by 40% by 2030. It's in our Paris Agreement. But the government we have unilaterally increased our emissions to 50 to 55% total emissions in Norway by 2030. And of course, the shipping industry, domestic shipping, that is a part of that international shipping. Of course, then you have the IMO targets and so on, but for domestic shipping is a part of our national commitments in the Paris Agreement.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Eduardo, you mentioned the role of multilateral institutions during your first remarks, and you mentioned the IMO was the one really to promote and regulate maritime transportation. Given your past experience as admiral from the Brazilian Navy, do you really believe that IMO has a role in driving change, even for countries like Brazil that really do not benefit from being close to their markets, but it's just the opposite, as you mentioned? We have to be very efficient in order to keep our commercial viability. And is IMO, is it a place where you find cooperation from other countries and even among different stakeholders?
Well, I think that IMO overall, obviously, it's a group of countries. The decision is assembly, a big assembly, hundreds of participants. But overall, IMO is fulfilling its mission. First of all, because safety of the shipping industry did a lot. 10 or 20 years ago, we had a lot of substandard ships. And thanks to IMO work, the level of safety of navigation nowadays is much better. I think that the work done by IMO helped national authorities to impose restrictions on the arrival of ships who do not meet the safety standards. And regarding pollution, I also think that IMO is taking the lead in this area. For instance, this year we began with the new sulfur standard for oil, and that's an advancement. It's a beginning. If it was not for this IMO procedure, probably we were not going to have this new standard. And the 50% of carbon reduction is another goal, very difficult. We still don't have the technology to meet that 50% reduction. New technology will have to be developed. You know, molten salt reactor, hydrogen, whatever. And the fact that IMO has established the goal, and that's a good beginning. I think that's the first step to actually meet that standard. You know, if it were not by that decision, we were going to be, you know, sort of just postponing.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that IMO overall is a very good, very important for the maritime community.
Okay, great. Thank you, Eduardo. And you just mentioned that new technologies really need to be developed and put in place for the climate goals to be obtained. And Minister mentioned some of these new technologies being tested and applied into your ferries, Minister. So you mentioned electric. You also mentioned hydrogen in the near future. You mentioned LNG and batteries. So, but you and if I'm correct, you mentioned ammonia vessels as well.
Yes.
So, Minister, if you had, you know, kind of put a roadmap of technology advancements, how would you really rank all these new technologies, and when do you expect ammonia vessels to be commercially viable?
Well, I mean, they are different. Of course, they are in different maturity steps, this technology. I mean, LNG is there already, and right now it's replacing diesel and of course, heavy fuel oil, which is more back in time. So that is a technology that is already commercially viable. And of course, we'll provide some steps of the way, even though, of course, LNG, if you're going to a zero emission future, LNG is also, it also has emissions, but of course, it's much better than heavy fuel oil and diesel oil. And electric ferries, we had our first electric ferry in 2015. Of course, it's still not commercially, but I think we will, during the next decade, maybe see it. It depends also very much about the battery technology. I mean, for the time being, our electric ferries, they are charged onshore, which means it's only more or less short distance ferries across a fjord or so far that this technology is there. For more medium distance ferries, of course, you still need development of a battery technology, which is still not there, which we maybe see in a decade or so before that we have a battery technology that makes at least short range or middle range electric ferries viable. For the more long run, more long distance boats, I will see batteries are probably very far ahead for long distance to see batteries without being very heavy to be able to have that capacity. I cannot see that in a short to medium run. That is why we also have developed like hydrogen, which of course also had the potential for more longer distance, at least medium to longer distance shipping. But of course, still we are putting a lot of efforts into developing hydrogen at the moment. But of course, it will probably still be maybe a decade or so before we can see, or even more, but before we can see hydrogen really taking the place. But it's difficult to see. I mean, sometimes technology happens very fast. We saw that in the 19th century, it didn't take that many years for all the world to change from wind to the steam engine, which of course created a tremendous change in the shipping industry. And I think the transition from traditional fossil fuel to renewable energy ships or back to renewable energy. I mean, this was wind before, shouldn't maybe take that much longer than a transition from wind to steam took 150 years ago.
Yes, thank you. And Eduardo, thinking of the technology advances that are being made, and given the role, the traditional role of the Brazilian Navy's, I would say, technological vocation, do you believe that the Brazilian Navy could be, trendsetter for our Brazilian landscape in terms of technological development?
Brazilian Navy is developing the nuclear reactor for the submarine, and that is a sort of an advance regarding decarbonization. And I also believe that nuclear reactors are one option for these new technologies, small nuclear reactors that will be furnished merchant ships, bigger merchant ships, and there are new types of nuclear reactors, safer, and with new concepts like the molten salt reactor that may adopt it. And many people believe in this new technology. That includes Bill Gates, who has just made a startup company to explore this type of reactor. So this is one way, one path that Brazilian Navy is adopting. There are other paths, like bioenergy. We always in Brazil, we tend to study not just in the Navy, but most research institutes pay a lot of attention and put a lot of effort on bioenergy on land and seaweeds. I also think that we should go deeper into this technology, because it's something that it's good for Brazil. It's natural in Brazil, bioenergy, something.
Thank
We're
you.
very successful with alcohol, and so with other types of bioenergy.
And really getting these last element that Eduardo mentioned, Minister, you did not mention neither nuclear powered engines nor bioenergy for shipping. So those are two technological pathways that could be applicable to shipping, certainly to long distance, and that hold lower levels of emission. Are these technologies under the screen of the Norwegian government or the Norwegian private industry?
Well, nuclear energy, I mean, that the technology there is still available. I mean, just across our border, we see numbers of nuclear-powered Russian submarines, which also makes nuclear engines quite politically controversial in Norway, because, of course, one is the risk of accidents. I mean, we have seen, of course, the Russian submarines have much older technology and so on, and we've seen accidents there. Is, of course, the risk of accidents and also of decommission, after all. So nuclear energy is generally quite controversial in Norway. So even if the technology is there, I think that is quite difficult politically to introduce nuclear energy in Norway. We don't have any nuclear power plants, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Bioenergy, yes, that's a possibility. I mean, Brazil has got, I mean, you got experience from bioethanol for the cars, and bioenergy is, of course, also a solution. We are also testing it now for planes, for aviation, which also, of course, for long distance shipping could be a possibility. But of course, we also have, it has to be sustainable bioenergy, because there are the pluses and minuses of bioenergy, because we have the climate challenge, yes, but we also have the biodiversity challenge. I mean, we don't want to import bioenergy produced in the rainforest, for instance, whether it is in Amazon or in Indonesia or wherever. So it has to be, if it's bioenergy, it has to be make sure that it is produced in a sustainable way from second generation waste, for instance.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I'm concerned. I know that Deputy Minister has to leave and in about a few minutes. So do you want to address your final comments, and then I'll continue with Admiral Eduardo, so you'll not be late for your next appointment?
No, I thank you. First, I would like to thank you very much for this very important conference. And I mean, what looks ahead of us on the geopolitical risks, I think that the largest risk actually ahead of us is to do nothing or to do too little to avoid climate change and too little or too late, because we know that the global consequences will be very severe, both for Brazil and for Norway and for the rest of the world, if we don't act enough sufficiently now to stop climate change. And of course, now still we have some years. You asked me how many years do you think you will have a technology transition. At least now you can have research, you can plan, you still have some years to develop new technologies to make them become commercial. But of course, if we don't act now, we will have less and less time to introduce new technologies, and it will be more and more urgent. So I think the largest risk is actually to do nothing now. We have to act now to see that the necessary transition that we need, that the world needs for the world to come, because if we don't act now, unfortunately, I think the world will be a much less pleasant place to live in. And well, with the COVID-19 challenge, as I say, it's unfortunately a short-term crisis, but of course the climate crisis could be longer and more severe. So I think that is important. And but also of course this transition to new energy sources will also change the global politics in a way. I mean, right now the most important sea routes are the oil and gas transport to the Middle East and Persian Gulf and so on. So I think when you move into new renewable energies with new demands for other commodities, you probably also will affect the international maritime industry. You will see different sea routes. Maybe, of course, not so much dependent on oil and gas from the Persian Gulf, for instance. So I think we have to act now. It will not be easy. It will be difficult, but also it's necessary to do. And I also think that the benefits ahead for the maritime sector will also be huge for the companies that are ahead in this transition. So thank you very much for the seminar. It's a very good, very interesting seminar. I wish you also good luck for the rest of the webinar, and I also hope to join you later, maybe physically in Rio. I would like to go there. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was really great. Thank you, Minister. And Eduardo, I'm happy to continue with you. I'd like to come back to the Blue Amazon issue that you have raised initially. I'm not sure if everybody here online is aware, but it's an offshore maritime area of approximately, correct me please if I'm wrong, 4.5 million kilometers squared under Brazilian control. And I know that you're a profound fan of this economic zone, as it is rich both in terms of marine biodiversity, but also a potential of energy resources. According to your understanding, what is the strategic role that it may have for Brazil as a maritime power, Blue Amazon?
Well, the concept of the Blue Amazon is in itself a huge strategic meaning. So it's a concept that, okay, this sea is very important as a whole. It belongs to Brazil. It's obligation of Brazil to take care of it in all its aspects. It has a lot of potential. No, we know about the oil, and if you remember that we are exploring oil in an area that 20 years ago we had not an idea that we had that oil and that we would have the technology to exploit it, and we did it. That was, I mean, a huge task. Also, there are a lot of minerals on the seabed. We don't have the technology yet. There are dangers involved regarding the environment. We have to be very careful in any step we take to explore minerals underwater, but it's the future. There will be a day when technology will enable us to explore the bottom of the sea and take some minerals out of it. The Blue Amazon also is potentially a source of other forms of energy. As I said, wind energy. Now, it's probably the perfect place to have a wind array, because it's It doesn't interfere with other human activities. It doesn't interfere with other nature, other aspects of nature. There's the bioenergy. Again, Brazil has that's a big potential for Brazil, bioenergy from the sea, seaweeds. That's a point I wouldn't go into that. And tourism, obviously, too. Amazon has a lot. Big Brazil is a tropical area, nice weather all year long, lot of coast, beautiful beach. So we could explore more of the Amazon regarding tourism. And finally, environment itself, it's very important. And lately we have adopted some areas to protect them. Around of Trindade Island, for instance, is an important region, and we have preserved it, established an environmental protected area there.
Mm-hmm.
Archipelagos of São Pedro e São Paulo archipelagos, another important area environmentally speaking. There is now a reserve area there, environmental reserve area there. Alcatraz is a third area. I'm just saying the ones that may have been directly involved in the establishment of the areas, but there are many others, and we should care about this. Environment and climate change is a major concern to all of us, as the minister said. So this is another aspect of having the Blue Amazon under control, and as Brazil did, will help to preserve these areas. Mm-hmm. So the potential, the fact is that the Blue Amazon has a lot of potential, but we don't know much of it yet, as we don't know much about the Green Amazon. So first step is to begin to study, to understand a little bit more of what. And second, and that's a problem with Brazilians, we are we call what I call sea blindness. We don't look at the sea. We live with our backs to the sea. The sea is extremely important for our daily life. Now we understand its importance on the oil industry. But there are many other aspects that I would consider that are also important and that have not been perfectly understood by Brazilians. Okay?
No, perfect. And it's very interesting that you mentioned that we are blind when we look to the sea, because we definitely should not be blind. And if you I'm mixing, questions that I have in my background here and questions from the audience, so I forgot to mention, but I'm going to raise a question made here again from the audience. So if you have to select only one area for deep collaboration between Brazil and Norway to address the issues that we've been discussing so far, which one would it be? One area of collaboration.
Maritime. They are good. They know how to go to sea. The maritime, the Norwegians are sailors by nature. So the maritime industry, they are they developed very well. They know a lot about shipping industry, about going to sea, they are good seafarers, and that reflects in there. They are not sea blind. So if I would choose an area of collaboration, that would be the maritime industry and everything that is related to sea. That includes the oil industry, because both our countries operate at sea. Most of our oil come from the sea, but they are sailors by excellence.
Yeah, and maybe another question before I hand it over to Camargo. But we also try to raise geopolitical tensions here. And you mentioned the role of the US Navy as being one of the most maybe powerful in this landscape. And so this goes back to the role of the US. Given then the new government elected, do you believe that the US could put in place policies that could affect the maritime transportation sector and combining this with the impacts of the global pandemic. So this is the first part of the question, and maybe related to it, if you could explore what do you expect in terms of US versus China under the new government when it comes to the South China Sea conflict as well?
I mean, well, regarding the US and China, there are many tensions now, not just maritime, South China. South China Sea is one of them. But we have Hong Kong, we have technology, we have the 5G, we have human rights, mutual accusations, and commercial war, trade war. So there are a lot of points of tension. At the same time, the prosperity of China is deeply dependent upon the prosperity of the United States and vice versa. Both countries have a huge trade, and a lot of things in the US come from China, and a lot of things in China, or a lot of money in China, comes from the US. So it's a partnership. Even if they don't want it, they are partners. I hope that this will surpass the rivalry, the disputes they have right now. The US, after the shale oil, sort of become a little bit more isolationist, more independent from the outside world. It no longer needs oil from the Persian Gulf, from Venezuela, and that gave the US a certain freedom, a greater freedom of maneuver in the world chessboard. You see what US forces are retreating back to the US because they no longer are concerned about certain areas. But South China Sea and that area in Asia is very, very important for the US, and they keep very concerned about that. They keep a lot of military forces there, naval forces, and it's a dispute that we hope that will remain just as a trade dispute. But regarding change of government, regarding maritime industry, I think that the US has been very a steady course on maritime policies. I don't see major changes on that.
Okay, there are a few questions more, but I'd like to give Camargo the opportunity also to raise a question and to really close this event. And before handing it over to Camargo, I'd like again to thank you, Admiral Eduardo, for your thoughtful participation. It's been a really true pleasure to moderate this session with you and Deputy Minister Lunde. And thank you, of course, to CEBRI and Marianne, the Consulate of Norway. Camargo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Clarissa. Another excellent event. I think it comes as no surprise, given the experience, the knowledge, the responsibility that our speakers have on the subject. And you yourself, Clarissa, you did a very good job, as always, in driving the most of our speakers. So I think it was a really fantastic event. I hope all the audience that have enjoyed. So I did immensely. Norway and Brazil, some people may think that, well, and we are indeed far away geographically. We are countries that have different stories, but we may say that Norway and Brazil are linked by the sea. The sea is not separating us; it links us, because we have, as has been demonstrated during the seminar, many common interests in sea: shipping, oil and gas, energy in general. Is something that link us. I think there are also something that make ourselves similar. We both have strong interests that the world evolves in a way that it's better for Norway and Brazil, and we both countries, I think, have the opportunity to play a leading role, not a leading role, let's say, by size or by economic power, because Norway is a small country, Brazil is a big country, but is still the developing country. But we can give this leadership position much more by our soft power than by our hard power. So these two countries have a lot to offer to the world in order to be present in the tables that are going to discuss the future of energy and the future of the maritime sector and many others. So I'm very pleased to listen to the minister, because he mentioned aspects that for us in CEBRI are also central to our vision. He mentioned about the opening of trade. He mentioned about the belong to the future of energy, embracing the energy transition towards a greener economy, a low carbon economy. That's what we really believe in CEBRI. We believe that this also represents an enormous opportunity for Brazil going forward. So this was very much in line. So I think in Norway and Brazil, and CEBRI in particular, and in Norway, the General Consul and the Embassy, I think we have plenty of opportunities to exploit further these areas of the common sharing of vision of the world. That's another important point. I think that it was Admiral Eduardo that brought, and it was interesting for me to think about. It was about multilateralism. It started in the sea. That was a point that Admiral Eduardo made. And that's very important. And this is something also that is a strong value or piece that CEBRI values, multilateralism, and we are pleased to see that the world has moved away from multilateralism, and they are going back, we hope, after this election, the US, for example. And we in CEBRI are convinced that most of these challenges that we have discussed today, such as the climate challenge, such as trading challenges, geopolitical challenges that we discussed today, they can only be solved by multilateral agreements. We have to sit around the table, all the countries, and that's where I think both Norway and Brazil can play a leading role in these discussions. So I was very pleased that I believe that from this debate, we are going to take a lot of interesting points that we are going to transform this into a white paper, something that to be registered. And with that, I'd like to thank all that have participated in this debate, all our audience for their time. To thank again very much our minister Lunde, Admiral Eduardo, Clarissa, Catavento, all the people from CEBRI and Catavento that made this event to work as it did. And thank you very much, and thank you for having this event with us. Thank you, and with that, goodbye.
Obrigada. Obrigada, Eduardo. Thank you, Marianne. Obrigada, Camargo.
Thank you so much. Obrigada.
Marianne.
Tchau.
Tchau, obrigado.
Ciao, ciao.